Welcome to another podcast in which we'll be talking about James Mahu's essay, Our Local Universe. Sophia and Phil greet you from the microphone.
Hello to everyone.
You know what keeps me up at night, Phil? The idea that we're all essentially creating our own personal universes every single day, yet most of us don't even realize the power we hold.
That's such a fascinating way to open this discussion, Sophia. And it really connects to how we're seeing these power dynamics play out on the global stage right now.
Well, it's like watching this elaborate playground dynamic unfold, right? We've got nations acting like toddlers. Some are the bullies, others form little cliques, and there's always that one trying to be the playground monitor.
Hmm, that's actually a perfect analogy. And what's really interesting is how this pattern keeps repeating throughout history.
You know what's wild about this whole situation? We're seeing these same patterns emerge with artificial intelligence now. It's like we're at this crucial tipping point where technology could either amplify our divisions or help us bridge them.
That's exactly what concerns me about the military-industrial complex's approach to AI. They're viewing it primarily as a tool for dominance rather than connection.
Speaking of connection, let's dive into this concept of our local universe. It's not just some abstract idea, but something that directly impacts how we experience reality every single moment.
Could you break down what exactly we mean by local universe? I think this is a concept many of our listeners might find intriguing.
Well, imagine your consciousness as the center of a sphere that extends outward, encompassing everything you're experiencing in this moment. Your thoughts, emotions, physical surroundings, and even the subtle energetic connections you have with others.
So it's like we're each the star at the center of our own galaxy in a way.
Exactly. And here's what's really mind-bending. We're constantly shaping this personal universe through what the physicists might call our vibrational expression. Every thought, every emotion, every action we take is literally molding our reality.
That's fascinating, but I imagine some people might be thinking this sounds a bit too theoretical. How does this actually play out in daily life?
Well, let me give you a concrete example. You know how sometimes you wake up in a bad mood and suddenly everything seems to go wrong that day? That's your vibrational state actively shaping your local universe.
Oh, right. Like when you're running late and hit every red light, and then it seems like the whole world is conspiring against you.
Precisely. But here's the key insight. We have the power to consciously shift these vibrations through something called coherence, which is basically aligning our thoughts, emotions, and actions with higher frequencies like unconditional kindness.
That sounds wonderful in theory, but how do we maintain that kind of alignment when we're dealing with real-world challenges?
You know, that's where the practice comes in. It's not about being perfect, it's about consistently returning to that awareness of interconnection. Think of it like tuning an instrument. We're constantly adjusting our frequency.
So it's more about the process than achieving some ideal state?
Exactly. And what's really fascinating is how this understanding could transform our approach to global conflicts. Instead of trying to force change through power and dominance, we could focus on elevating the vibration of our own local universes.
That reminds me of the quantum physics principle of entanglement, how particles can influence each other instantaneously across vast distances.
Yes. And just like in quantum physics, these influences might not be immediately visible, but they're happening all the time. Every kind thought, every compassionate action creates ripples in the fabric of our collective reality.
How does this relate to the current global tensions we're seeing? Can individual actions really make a difference on that scale?
Well, think about it this way. Every major social change in history started with individuals shifting their consciousness. The civil rights movement, environmental awareness, technological revolutions, they all began with people changing their local universes.
That's a powerful perspective. It takes the focus off trying to control others and puts it back on our own sphere of influence.
And you know what's really exciting about this? The science is starting to catch up with what mystics have been saying for millennia. Research in quantum physics and consciousness studies is beginning to validate these interconnections.
That's fascinating. Do you think we'll reach a point where this becomes widely accepted scientific fact?
Well, the evidence is already mounting. Studies on meditation, collective consciousness, and even the placebo effect are showing how our internal states can influence physical reality. But here's what's really interesting. We don't have to wait for science to prove it to start practicing it.
So what would you say to someone who's skeptical about all this? How can they start exploring these concepts in a practical way?
I'd suggest starting with something simple, like paying attention to how your emotional state affects your daily experiences. Notice how different your world looks when you're feeling grateful versus when you're feeling frustrated.
That's such a tangible way to begin observing these principles in action.
And here's another practical tip: start thinking of challenges as opportunities to practice maintaining higher vibrations. When something difficult happens, ask yourself, how can I respond to this with unconditional kindness?
That's really challenging, though, especially in today's world with all its complexities and conflicts.
Absolutely true, and that's why we call it a practice. It's like building a muscle. Each time we choose kindness over reaction, we're strengthening our ability to maintain higher vibrations even in difficult situations.
How does this understanding apply to our relationship with technology, especially as AI continues to develop?
That's such a crucial question. I think we need to approach technology with this same awareness of interconnection. AI isn't separate from our local universe. It's another tool through which we can either amplify division or foster connection.
So it's really about the consciousness we bring to these tools rather than the tools themselves?
Exactly. And this brings us back to our opening point about power dynamics. Whether we're talking about international relations, personal relationships, or our interaction with AI, it all comes down to how we choose to shape our local universe.
That's really the key insight, isn't it? That we have this incredible power to influence reality, but it starts with our own consciousness.
Yes, and imagine what could happen if more people began consciously working with these principles. We could create a ripple effect that transforms our collective reality from the inside out.
That's actually quite hopeful when you think about it, that we don't have to wait for external circumstances to change to begin making a difference.
And that's really the message I hope people take away from this conversation: that each of us has the power to shape our local universe through conscious awareness and unconditional kindness. It's both a responsibility and an opportunity.
Well, this has certainly given me a lot to think about in terms of how I approach my own local universe.
You know what's beautiful about this? We're all learning and growing together. Every time we choose kindness, every time we remember our interconnection, we're contributing to the evolution of human consciousness. And that's something worth waking up for every morning.
Yes, exactly. Now it's up to the listeners to study the essay for themselves. It will certainly help them to understand the concept of the local universe in a deeper way. You can find the link in the text below the video.
Goodbye from the mic, Sophia.
Goodbye, Phil.